my lords. Today we are going to discuss one of the 5 fallen empires, specifically the Xenophobic Isolationists, the destroyers of Shallash, and those who we believe imprisoned the synthetic being known as Cetana. The Xenophobes are undoubtedly the most aggressive, and frankly the most dangerous of the 5. In this report I shall detail their remaining territory, holdings and planets, their ship designs, and I shall speculate on what we know regarding the destruction of the Shallarians, and the Xenophobes' relationship to Cetana, the synthetic queen. I'll begin with the Xenophobes' current holdings. The Xenophobes, like the other fallen empires, occupy a small cluster of systems with approximately 6 planets inhabited. However, of the 6, only 2 are fully populated, with the other 4 containing nothing remotely regarding any production capability. They appear to just be colonies for housing population who for whatever reason don't wish to live inside their core systems. The 2 heavily populated and industrialized planets are called the core and the boundary, although technically the boundary is a moon that orbits the core. These worlds are populated by both the xenophobic population and their nerve-stapled slaves. They appear to only have positive genetic traits, alluding to some sort of genetic modification technique. Furthermore, the number of nerve-stapled slaves matches perfectly the number of xenophobes, perhaps suggesting there is a 1-to-1 slave per person arrangement. The fact that they're nerve-stapled removes any sort of implication for rebellion. Both their planets are largely similar. The core holds on it 3 Aegis complexes. These are monumental planetary defense complexes designed to hold numerous planetary defense forces ready to defend the planet. 1 affluence center, a building designed to produce consumer goods at the cost of minerals. A nourishment center, which can feed the entire planet. A dimensional fabricator, which is a building that opens a doorway to the fabric of dimensional space and extracts rare resources. 2 Class 4 singularities. These produce copious amounts of energy. A ziggurat of justice, which appears to be the zenith of legal institution, perhaps suggesting that they still suffer with crime even after all these years. And finally, 2 autoforges, buildings that are expansive nano-replicators that transform raw material into advanced alloy. Both their planets are heavily defended, with the core being the slightly stronger of the 2. Should we wish to conquer these worlds, we will need an ungodly number of warriors to do so. The fleets. Next we move on to the Xenophobes' naval capabilities. While fallen, they appear to only have a relatively small battle fleet. It is however incredibly well armed and led by the most fearsome of admirals. The Xenophobes have a tendency to outfit their battleships with kinetic weaponry. They use exclusively kinetic batteries, mega cannons, Gauss cannons, and on their larger vessels, hangar bays. They protect these vessels with an even mix of armor and shields. If we wish to efficiently fight these ships, I would suggest outfitting our own vessels with significant armor, and forgoing shielding altogether. A mix of both energy and kinetic weapons would be best to deal with their protective, balanced setup. I'd also note that they are by far the most aggressive of the 5 fallen empires. We have witnessed many empires attempt to colonize systems that border them, only to be utterly annihilated in retaliation for even attempt to expand near them, despite there clearly not being a threat. Now we'll move on to some of the less obvious details regarding the Xenophobes, and we shall start with Admiral Tuborek, an admiral who is left to die by his own people. Dr. Foster will detail the report on how we found Tuborek. During a recent survey of a previously undiscovered system in what we believe used to be military isolationist territory, we discovered a shielded world. All attempts by our science team to penetrate the barrier with our sensors have failed. The scanning beam is simply deflected back at the ship as though we were looking at a mirror. The barrier's energy readings fluctuate somewhat, possibly as a result of thousands of years of decay, but breaching it with raw firepower would still be impossible. My team and I have proposed a special project to investigate ways of removing the barrier, but we wonder if it is created to keep something in rather than out. Our experience with these shields has often been poor. In a previous report we encountered a genocidal race of lizards known as the Preki. That did not end well for anyone. Nevertheless, we shall attempt to bring the shield down. After many months, we had managed to lower the energy barrier that surrounded the planet. Our scientists found what was an indistinct but habitable world, devoid of civilization. There was one notable exception. A small, isolated hut was found perched upon a mesa in the planet's northern hemisphere. Within the hut we found an old alien, who demanded to speak to our government. The alien stated, "You cannot imagine how good it is to finally see clear sky again. I am Grand Admiral Tuborek, former master of the combined Armada and victor of 100 battles. I personally oversaw the conquest of the Juthbajak, Rikinak, Bilnark, and Juskari, empires hundreds of your years old. As my savior, I pledge my service to you. I should be honored to lead your mighty fleets into battle against your enemies." We queried with the Admiral why he was marooned on the planet, to which he stated, "Without my leadership skills, we would just be another extinct forgotten species. I crushed the fleets of all who opposed us and put a dozen worlds to the torch, all to preserve the future of my kind. Yet this was my reward. When peace finally arrived and we sought treaties with those we had defeated, my presence became an embarrassment. I became a symbol of cruelty, and for my so-called war crime I was imprisoned alone on this world. They lacked the courage to execute me. When I was abandoned, they explained that time would pass more slowly on the inside of the barrier. For me, some 40 of your years have passed, while the rest of the universe, untold centuries, must have come and gone." Tuborek, as expected, is a fantastic admiral. He tends to follow aggressive tactics, demanding to be the tip of the spear. He is obsessive and has a singular purpose, to the point where he will always take an advantage when offered, even if it puts him and his ship at risk. All things considered, he is extremely capable. Next, my lords, we shall discuss the destruction of Shallash. Shallash was once home to a wonderful society who reached levels of terraforming technology hitherto unmatched. They were, for reasons not entirely clear to us, utterly annihilated. No quarter was given, and a genocide rarely witnessed befell this empire. It was, we believe, conducted on behalf of the Xenophobic Isolationists. Dr. Holloway details the discovery of the Shallash system and what we found there. Shallash was once clearly home to a highly advanced civilization. Its 6 moons with orbit at equidistant intervals was evidence enough of that. However, the planet is in ruins, and the entire star system shows signs of an extraordinarily violent struggle. We wonder what happened here. Surface scans of the planet and its 6 moons showed that once all were densely inhabited. They supported a population many times beyond that of Unity. Furthermore, an analysis of the moons has concluded that their positioning cannot have been natural. They must have been dragged into orbit and then stationed so precisely that even now they remain in a perfect balance. However, the cataclysm that occurred here was so violent and occurred so long ago that sadly few records remain from which we can recreate the story of the inhabitant civilization. It has taken several weeks of heavy excavation work, but we have discovered a series of intact data records depicting the inhabitants of the planet, the Shallarians. When their civilization was at its peak around 1,000 years ago, it was clear that the Shallarians were very advanced indeed, capable of molding entire solar systems to their will. The moons of Shallash originally orbited the system's gas giants, and were dragged into their current positions as an elaborate work of art. Durad, the shattered planet opposite Shallash, was extensively terraformed to be a near identical but uninhabited clone to Shallash. This planet served as a nature reserve and a reminder of how their homeworld had once been. Despite all these marvels, no mention has been found of the Shallarians' military capabilities. Indeed, they appear to have cared little for anything happening beyond the confines of their own space. Several more weeks have passed, and I've been unable to shed further light on the Shallarian civilization. It seems that they were an exceptionally peaceful species, who, in spite of clear evidence to the contrary on the galactic stage, considered war between spacefaring civilizations to be inconceivable and illogical. After all, Their own technological prowess had brought scarcity within their reach. What more could they possibly want? Consequently, they rather neglected building up their military forces, leaving themselves vulnerable. However, we've discovered nothing that uncovers or offers any clues as to who or why the Shallarians were destroyed. It has taken a full Sol cycle to uncover the truth of the Shallarian demise. It seems that they lived in peace for hundreds of years before the rise of the Xenophobic Isolationists, which took them by surprise. The Xenophobes were a far cry from the decadent aliens they are today. In that era, they were violently aggressive and an expansionist race. Upon their first encounter with one another, the Shallarians considered the Xenophobes to be ignorant and uncivilized upstarts in need of guidance, whereas the Xenophobes saw the Shallarians as an anathema. So great was their horror at this utopian pacifism that they resolved the Shallarians must be wiped from the face of the galaxy. Since their victims had no military, the ensuing war was as short as it was brutal. When the deed was done, the Xenophobes left behind an automated guardian to ensure that no survivors could return, and thus revive the civilization that they so hated. In addition to these records, we also found a data core explaining Shallarian terraforming methods. The technology in the field is far superior to our own, so the knowledge will surely benefit us, the Commonwealth of Man. Nevertheless, this was a grave ending to the once utopian civilization of Shallash. The final note to discuss is regarding the Xenophobes' links to Cetana, the synthetic queen. This is mostly speculation, but I am certain that they are interconnected in some manner. We know that Cetana was initially defeated and imprisoned with the help of Zarklan and the Animator of Clay. We assume that all the fallen empires were involved in her defeat, seeing as she targets them first, but what remains unclear is why the Xenophobes are at the forefront of this. They are targeted first, without fail, every time. I think it's because the Xenophobes, being the strongest military power, were the ones given the responsibility to imprison Cetana. It was they who, once defeated, took her and chained her, and they kept her under lock and key for several millennia. And thus, when she returns, they are her obvious target. Despite this, it's noteworthy that the Holy Guardians are not targeted first. Given that Cetana despises Zarklan for obvious reasons, and the Guardians worship Zarklan, perhaps she simply recognizes the threat that the Xenophobes pose. Perhaps it's a simple matter that she's closest to them. It's unlikely we'll ever know. Thanks for watching, folks. Do you agree that the Xenophobes are the most dangerous fallen empire? What topic would you like me to cover next? Please let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear more from me, please click the video on screen now.